hidden for centuries beneath the sands of Egypt. A mysterious stone ceiling was carved with stars, gods, and signs of the zodiac. When French explorers found it at Dendera, they believed they had uncovered the oldest map of the heavens ever created. But here's the twist. Some scholars said it wasn't ancient at all. Was this masterpiece built under the pharaohs or under the Romans? Was it science or pure symbolism? From Denin's daring sketches in the dark chambers of Egypt to the fierce debates of Laplace, Fourier, and Visconti in Paris, the Dendera Zodiac became more than stone. It became a battlefield between history, art, and astronomy itself. Join us as we reveal how one carved circle changed the way the world saw ancient Egypt forever.
From the sands of Egypt to the shelves of European museums, every artifact has a story. And sometimes that story begins not with an archaeologist, but with a storyteller. Today I would like to begin this episode with a note of appreciation. I am Professor Dr. Salah Lotfy from the Egyptian Atomic Energy Authority, and on behalf of For Science Salah Lotfy channel, I extend my gratitude to Mr. Beshir Shousha, a content creator who has brought renewed attention to one of the most important chapters in Egypt's history, the story of the Dendera Zodiac and its removal from Egypt, as told through the 1822 French book by Monsieur Saulnier-Fils. Beshir Shousha is not just a digital creator. He is a modern historian with a camera. He specializes in culture and history, using social media to make Egypt's heritage accessible to everyone. Through his videos on YouTube and other platforms, he highlights stolen and forgotten artifacts, reminding us that our cultural memory is a treasure that must be protected. Born into a distinguished Azurite merchant family known for their excellence in the textile trade, Beshir grew up surrounded by stories of patience, wisdom, and craftsmanship, lessons whispered through the bustling streets of Old Cairo. As a child, he loved sports and travel, but it was books that truly captured his imagination. Historical and documentary works opened his eyes to worlds beyond the present, worlds he would one day bring to life for others. Educated at Jesuit schools, Beshir learned early the value of knowledge and culture. He graduated in business administration in 1996 with a minor in theater and economics, a unique combination that shaped both his analytical and creative sides. After graduation, he joined his family's textile business, mastering the art of communication, negotiation, and human understanding. But history was calling, and Beshir listened. In 2018, he launched his own YouTube channel, stepping into the world of cultural content creation. There, he divided his work into heritage videos, historical storytelling, and comedic reflections, a balance between education and entertainment that quickly captured a growing audience. Through his series 3 Hena, He Lived Here, and Ramadan in Egypt, A Different Story, Beshir revived forgotten corners of Egyptian history, streets, homes, and figures that once shaped the nation's cultural identity. He didn't just narrate history, he brought it to life. His love for the stage eventually led him to join AXT Theater in 2022, where he found deep fulfillment in acting and creative performance. Beshir has since appeared in several Egyptian films, proving that creativity knows no boundaries. Beshir Shousha represents a new generation of Egyptian voices. Voices that use digital platforms not for fame, but for heritage preservation. He reminds us that sharing history is an act of resistance against forgetting, and that it is indeed necessary to publish historical content across all social platforms. As we explore the story behind the 1822 book, Notice sur le voyage de Monsieur le Lorrain en Égypte, we also celebrate those who keep Egypt's story alive today. Because every time a creator like Beshir Shousha tells our story, he rewrites the narrative, one that belongs not to collectors, but to a civilization. In the early 19th century, as Europe's fascination with ancient Egypt reached its peak, a quiet publication appeared in Paris. A slim volume bearing the title Notice sur le voyage de Monsieur le Lorrain en Égypte et Observations sur le Zodiac circulaire de Dendera. Written in 1822 by Monsieur Saulnier-Fils, this rare work is more than a traveler's diary. It is one of the earliest analytical records of one of Egypt's most mysterious relics, the circular zodiac of Dendera. At that time, Egypt had just begun to open its ancient temples to European scholars. Napoleon's description de l'Egypte had sparked a wave of curiosity, but few travelers had the chance to document what they saw with both precision and wonder. Among them was Monsieur Lorrain, a Frenchman whose journey through Egypt became the foundation for this text. His companion, or perhaps his commentator, Saulnier, took upon himself the task of recording what he called observations on the circular zodiac. The Dendera Zodiac, now preserved in the Louvre, is not merely an artistic artifact. It is a celestial map carved in stone, depicting constellations and planetary alignments that once guided the ancient Egyptian priests' understanding of time, fate, and the heavens. In Saulnier's observations, we find the echoes of an age trying to decode this masterpiece. He questioned whether it represented the night sky as seen in the age of the pharaohs, or a later synthesis of Greek and Egyptian astronomy. He examined its circular design, unique among Egyptian reliefs, and compared it to known astronomical models from antiquity. Reading through his words, one can sense a delicate tension between scientific inquiry and poetic fascination. Saulnier did not write as a cold observer. He wrote as a man witnessing the bridge between myth and measurement, between cosmic imagination and human curiosity. He carefully described how the zodiac's circular form might symbolize eternity, how the figures of the ram, the lion, and the scorpion followed celestial order, and how the ancient Egyptians encoded astronomical cycles into their sacred art. 2 centuries later, this 1822 document remains a cornerstone in the history of Egyptology and archaeoastronomy. It captures the mindset of an era when Egypt was both a scientific puzzle and a poetic revelation. Through Saulnier's pen, we can trace how European scholars first approached the vast enigma of Egyptian cosmology, not as conquerors of knowledge, but as humble seekers, gazing up at the same stars that once guided the priests of Hathor. This forgotten publication reminds us that every discovery begins with a question, and every question carries the curiosity of those who came before us. From Paris in 1822 to Egypt's eternal skies, Saulnier's notice continues to echo a timeless truth, that science and wonder are never far apart.
To For Science Salah Lotfy channel, where science meets curiosity. في هذه القناة لا نكتفي بعرض الأبحاث العلمية، بل نترجمها إلى المعرفة التي تصل إليك أينما كنت. Our mission is to make global scientific research understandable, accessible, and multilingual. جميع الفيديوهات العلمية هنا مترجمة إلى اللغة العربية، بالإضافة إلى لغات عالمية أخرى. French, Spanish, German, Urdu, and more. Because science speaks every language. نعم، العلم يتحدث بكل اللغات، ونحن نحرص أن يصلك بلغتك. If you're passionate about science, you're in the right place. اشترك الآن وابدأ رحلتك مع العلم خطوة بخطوة. For Science Salah Lotfy channel, العلم للجميع.
Welcome to For Science Salah Lotfy channel. I am Professor Salah Lotfy from the Egyptian Atomic Energy Authority. Today, we uncover one of the most fascinating and controversial stories in the history of Egyptology. It is the journey of Monsieur Lorrain and the mysterious zodiac of Dendera, as told in the 822 French publication, Notice sur le voyage de Monsieur Lorrain en Égypte, et Observations sur le zodiaque circulaire de Dendera, written by Monsieur Saulnier Fils. This small Parisian booklet, printed over 200 years ago, may appear modest. Yet behind its faded pages lies a saga of ambition, politics, and cultural conflict when the ancient stars of Egypt became the prize of European powers. This modernization, a new kind of trade flourished, the trade in antiquities. Muhammad Ali granted permits for foreign explorers to excavate ancient sites. And that's when Saulnier and Lorrain entered the story. They weren't ordinary travelers. They were part of a wave of Europeans eager to claim pieces of Egypt's ancient glory for their museums back home. Lorraine's mission was daring, to remove the circular zodiac of Dendera, a magnificent celestial relief carved into the ceiling of the temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor. The zodiac was believed to represent the Egyptian sky and cosmic order, a calendar of the gods themselves. This relief had remained hidden for centuries, unnoticed even by earlier travelers like Bruce and Norden. It was first drawn by the French artist Dominique Vivant Denon during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. To French scholars, it symbolized not just science, but national pride. So Lorraine's goal was clear: bring this artifact from Egypt to Paris as a trophy of knowledge and civilization. But removing a massive stone disc from the ceiling of an ancient temple was no simple task. Lorraine prepared in France, commissioning saws, chisels, cranes, and even a custom-designed sledge to move the zodiac from the temple to the Nile. He departed for Alexandria in late 1820, carrying not only his tools, but official letters of recommendation and a firman, a travel permit, personally signed by Muhammad Ali Pasha himself. That document, written in Ottoman Turkish, ordered every governor in Egypt to assist Lorraine and protect him during his mission. It was dated 27th of January 1821. With this authority, he sailed south from Cairo along the Nile toward Dendera. But Egypt, in the early 19th century, was not a land free of rivalry. British and French agents competed fiercely over artifacts. The British consul Henry Salt and the French consul Bernardino Drovetti both claimed near-exclusive rights to excavate. To them, antiquities were not just art. They were power, prestige, and profit. So Lorraine had to act in absolute secrecy. He spread false rumors that he was heading to Thebes, while in truth, his destination was Dendera. Only a small team of locals and trusted assistants knew the real plan. Finally, in the darkness of night, Lorraine arrived at the quiet village of Dendera, near the ruins of ancient Tentyra. The local sheikh offered him shelter. From there began the operation to cut, lower, and transport the zodiac, a masterpiece carved into the stone ceiling for over 2,000 years. The zodiac's size and weight made it almost impossible to move. Yet Lorraine's ingenuity and determination prevailed. Piece by piece, he separated it from the ceiling, reduced its thickness, and slid it carefully onto his wooden sledge. It was then rolled toward the Nile, where it began its long voyage to France. By 1822, the circular zodiac of Dendera was installed in Paris. It became an instant sensation, admired, debated, and copied by scholars and artists alike. Displayed on Rue de Rivoli, the engraving was sold for 5 francs, a fortune at that time. To French society, it represented a triumph of civilization. But to Egypt, it was the loss of yet another treasure, one more chapter in the long story of cultural dispossession. Saulnier's booklet records this story in vivid detail. It portrays Egypt as a land awakening under Muhammad Ali, but also as a country open to exploitation by foreign powers. The author justifies the removal of the zodiac as a noble act, a gift to European science. But reading it today, we see it differently. We see the imbalance between curiosity and conquest, between admiration and appropriation. The Dendera Zodiac remains in the Louvre Museum in Paris to this day. Its removal still raises questions about ownership, ethics, and the legacy of colonial archaeology. Was Lorraine preserving history or stealing it? Through stories like this, we revisit the intertwined paths of knowledge and power. And as content creators like Beshir Shousha remind us, it is essential to retell these histories, to reclaim the Egyptian narrative, piece by piece. Thank you for joining me. I am Professor Salah Lotfy, and this is For Science Salah Lotfy channel. Stay with us as we explore more stories where science, history, and culture meet, under the eternal sky of Egypt. In the heart of Upper Egypt, where the desert winds whisper across centuries of forgotten stories, stands one of the greatest architectural wonders of the Thebaid, the Temple of Dendera. Massive sandstone blocks, quarried from nearby mountains, form a structure so majestic that even today it stirs awe in the hearts of those who gaze upon it. Its facade stretches over 150 feet, and its colossal columns, each 21 feet in circumference, are covered from base to capital with scenes of gods, rituals, and hieroglyphic mysteries. For centuries, travelers stood before these stones, feeling the weight of ancient Egypt's sacred silence. But in the early 19th century, this silence was broken by a mission that would forever change the destiny of the temple and raise fierce debates in Europe about science, heritage, and possession. It was here that Monsieur Lelorand, a determined French traveler, came in 1821 on an extraordinary quest to recover a celestial treasure hidden in the ceiling of Dendera's grand portico, the circular zodiac. This masterpiece of Egyptian astronomy, engraved on a single massive slab of sandstone, depicted constellations, deities, and cosmic cycles. Scholars believed it to be the oldest record of the stars, perhaps predating even the pyramids. To Europeans, it promised answers about the origins of time itself. To Egypt, it was a sacred text written in stone. At dawn, Lelorand set out with his interpreter, 20 Arab workers, and a local sheikh to guide the operation. He knew the risks. Rivals from other European nations were already nearby, sketching and measuring the same ruins. To protect his plan, Lelorand spread a clever rumor that he was traveling to the Red Sea to collect seashells. Only after the British expedition departed did he return secretly to begin his work. The task was immense. The zodiac was embedded in a 3-foot-thick ceiling slab, 12 feet long and weighing more than 55,000 kilograms. He began by drilling holes through solid sandstone, inventing tools and saws on site. Under the blazing 40-degree Egyptian sun, he worked for days, the heat so intense that it drove him to fever and near collapse. An Arab healer treated him with the juice of an unknown plant, saving his life. But Lelorand refused to stop. When his hands could no longer move, his assistant took over. They cut, sawed, and lifted stone for 22 exhausting days, until the great zodiac at last was freed from the ceiling that had held it for thousands of years. The victory was only the beginning. The zodiac had to be transported from Dendera to the Nile, over rugged ground, crumbling ruins, and irrigation canals. It took teams of men and beasts to move it, inch by inch, for 2 long days until it reached the riverbank. From there, it began its slow voyage northward, bound for France. In Paris, the artifact arrived like a trophy of empire, a symbol of science's triumph over time and distance. Today, it rests in the Louvre Museum, far from the land that carved it. For Egypt, it remains a painful reminder of the century of losses that stripped her temples and tombs of their treasures. The story of Monsieur Lelorand and the Dendera Zodiac is not just an episode of archaeology. It is a story of obsession, of how far human curiosity can go, and how much it can take. The temple itself still stands, its walls whispering the same hieroglyphs, its stones warmed by the same sun. But the sky above Dendera no longer mirrors the zodiac that once crowned it. I am Professor Salah Lotfy from the Egyptian Atomic Energy Authority, and this is for Science Salah Lotfy channel. Together, we revisit the pages of forgotten books to see not only how history was written, but how it was taken.
That year, dangerously low, its waters had retreated, leaving the riverbank towering 12 feet above the sluggish current. Yet there stood Monsieur Lelorand, facing the last and most perilous challenge of his mission, to load the sacred zodiac of Dendera onto a barge bound for France. To reach the river, he ordered a path carved into the embankment, 60 feet long, slanting down at 45 degrees. 30 men took their positions, ropes in hand, the massive slab secured to a dome palm tree nearby. To ease its descent, Lelorand placed greased planks beneath the cylinders. But destiny had other plans. The cable tore apart with a violent crack. The zodiac, a block of stone weighing more than 50 tons, broke free, crushing the men who held it and plunging with thunderous speed down the slope. It buried itself 6 feet deep in the wet soil beside the Nile. For a moment, Lelorraine stood frozen, struck by horror. Yet the courage of his Egyptian workers did not falter. Bruised and bleeding, they returned to the task. Within hours, through relentless effort, they freed the monument from the mud and finally placed it aboard the waiting boat. But the river had one more trial to offer. No sooner had the Zodiac been loaded than water began flooding through unseen cracks in the hull, fissures opened by the scorching heat. Within 5 minutes, the barge began to sink. Some men grabbed buckets, others dove into the Nile, sealing the gaps with mud and rags. They succeeded, barely. The vessel floated again. The second stone was placed beside the first, and the exhausted team, drenched and trembling, watched as the boat rocked gently on the water. That night, Lelorraine prepared to bid farewell to Dendera, and to the people whose loyalty had saved his mission. He longed for rest, for the calm of Lower Egypt after weeks of exhaustion and danger. But rest would not come so easily. The very next day, new enemies appeared, not in the desert, but among men of power. When Lelorraine ordered the captain to set sail, the man refused. He claimed the waters near Dishna were too shallow to pass, but Lelorraine soon learned the truth. The captain had been bribed, offered 1,000 Turkish piastres by rivals to delay the voyage for 3 weeks. Suspecting British agents, Lelorraine acted quickly. He matched the bribe, offering the same sum if the captain sailed immediately. The man fell to his knees, swearing loyalty. From that moment, he obeyed without hesitation. Even then, progress was slow. The Nile was so shallow that the boat ran aground daily, sometimes several times a day. For 60 leagues, nearly 200 miles, Lelorraine's barge crawled toward Cairo, struggling against sand, wind, and treachery. One afternoon, a British boat approached. A messenger shouted across the river, carrying an order from the Cairo Bay to seize the Dendera Zodiac. Behind the command was the influence of Henry Salt, the British consul general in Egypt, who claimed Lelorraine had stolen what he himself had planned to take. Lelorraine stood tall. He declared that he had acted under the authorization of Muhammad Ali Pasha himself, and that any attempt to seize the artifact would be an attack on the French flag he now raised over his vessel. The English emissary hesitated, then withdrew. The barge continued its slow passage to Cairo. At Cairo, Lelorraine learned the full story. Henry Salt had gone to the Pasha in anger, demanding the artifact be confiscated, but Egypt was in crisis. News had just arrived of a planned massacre in Alexandria, and Muhammad Ali had no time for quarrels over stones. Salt turned to his allies, pressing the Cairo Bay for action, but Lelorraine's permits were in perfect order.
The Pasha asked a single question. Was this man authorized by me? When the answer came yes, he replied simply, then let him keep what he has taken.
After months of peril, betrayal, and political intrigue, Lelorraine was finally free. He sailed north to Alexandria, where on July 18, 1821, the great circular zodiac of Dendera was loaded onto a ship bound for France. It had survived centuries of floods, fanatics, and neglect, and now it would cross the sea to a new destiny. On September 9, 1821, the ship entered the harbor of Marseille. Along with the monument came a letter from Lelorraine, the first news from him in 6 months. His partner, Jomard, rushed to inform the French Institute. The response was immediate and euphoric. The Académie des Beaux-Arts and the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres hailed it as a triumph of science and perseverance, an achievement honorable to France, once believed impossible, wrote Dacier, the perpetual secretary. When the monument emerged from quarantine, Marseille erupted in curiosity. The prefect, the general of the division, and the city's mayor hurried to see it. Crowds gathered at the docks, begging for a glimpse. An observer wrote, It was with almost religious feeling that I approached this ancient monument. The purity and fineness of its astronomical signs were astonishing.
Even the customs officials refused to charge import duty, declaring, "A monument of such value belongs to all humanity."
Thus ended one of the most daring archaeological operations of the 19th century. The Dendera Zodiac, a cosmic map carved by Egyptian priests, survived the fall of dynasties, the flood of the Nile, and the rivalries of empires. Today, it rests in the Louvre, far from the sands where it was born. And yet, its story, the courage, deceit, and ambition that carried it across continents, still speaks of an age when discovery and possession were one and the same. I am Professor Salah Lotfy, and this is for Science Salah Lotfy channel. Together, we revisit the voyages that changed how the world saw Egypt, and how Egypt in turn was seen by the world.
In 1822, a colossal piece of Egyptian heritage began its fateful journey from the Temple of Dendera to the heart of Paris. It was not a treasure of gold or jewels, but something far more mysterious. The Zodiac of Dendera, carved into stone, a celestial map that carried the knowledge and symbolism of ancient Egypt's view of the heavens. The operation was supervised by the talented French architect Monsieur Panchaud, who oversaw the packaging of this irreplaceable monument. Every stone was handled with an almost sacred precision, for one wrong move could have destroyed centuries of history. Before leaving Marseille, a foreign buyer offered a considerable sum to acquire the Zodiac. Yet the French refused, for, as Monsieur Saulnier writes, it would have been dishonorable to sell such a treasure to foreign speculators before all means had been exhausted to preserve it for France. Transporting the Zodiac was no simple feat. In Marseille, no carriage was strong enough to bear its massive stone weight. A special one had to be built. After an arduous journey, it finally arrived in Paris in January 1822. It took 3 days and 12 men to unload the blocks and move them into a ground floor hall. The task revealed the true scale of what Lorraine, the French traveler who removed the Zodiac from the ceiling of the Temple of Dendera, had achieved with nothing but the help of a few Egyptian peasants. Once unpacked, the monument immediately became the object of immense curiosity. 2 members of the Institut de France, along with members of the Commission d'Égypte, including Jollois and de Villiers, who had seen and drawn it in Dendera, examined it closely. Soon, a government commission was formed, including Georges Cuvier, Joseph Fourier, and Baron Vulcanaire, to determine the monument's value and fate. Their verdict was clear: the Zodiac must remain in France, for national honor was at stake. On April 4, 1822, Saulnier wrote to the Minister of the Interior, "We wish only to ensure that this precious monument remains in France, where so many reasons of national and scientific interest mark its rightful place." Yet months passed without reply. Meanwhile, offers continued to arrive, including one from a foreign house willing to pay 200,000 francs. But again, the French refused, holding fast to the belief that the Zodiac was not a commodity, but a legacy. The Dendera Zodiac was eventually displayed publicly, sparking debate across Europe. Was it merely art, or a map of the ancient sky? Could it reveal the age of the Egyptian civilization, or even the creation of the universe itself? According to Saulnier's detailed description, the circular Zodiac was carved into a stone medallion nearly 5 feet in diameter, enclosed within a square over 7 feet wide. Supported by 12 figures, 8 falcon-headed men and 4 women, it depicted the constellations of the heavens with extraordinary precision. At its center, a jackal figure watched over the spiral arrangement of the stars. Around it, the lion, Virgo with her sheaf of wheat, Libra with its scales, the scorpion, and the winged Sagittarius formed a celestial procession, nearly identical to the zodiac signs we know today. This resemblance fueled fiery debates among European scholars. The likes of Dupuis and Volney saw in these symbols proof that the world and human civilization were far older than the biblical timeline suggested. But Joseph Fourier, the great mathematician and physicist, proposed a different interpretation. that the Egyptian sphere was designed around 2,500 years before our era, marking the early understanding of astronomical precession, the shifting of the Earth's axis over millennia. Thus, the zodiac of Dendera became not only an artifact of art and religion, but a chronicle of scientific thought, bridging ancient Egyptian astronomy with modern science. Saulnier also noted the scars of time, the mutilated falcon-headed figures, the defaced corners. These marks, he believed, were the traces of Egypt's long spiritual revolutions, from Persian conquest to early Christian zeal. Even in their damage, they tell a story of faith, power, and the persistence of symbols. Today, the Dendera Zodiac still rests in the Louvre, far from the sands of Egypt, but its stones whisper of a time when the sky itself was a temple, and knowledge of the stars was sacred. And as we revisit the story of Monsieur Leloran's daring journey and Monsieur Saulnier's meticulous record, we are reminded that every monument taken from Egypt carries not only its stones, but a piece of its soul.
This has been For Science, Salah Lotfy channel. Together, we explore how history, science, and humanity intertwine across time. Stay tuned as we continue uncovering the untold stories behind the great monuments of Egypt.
2 centuries ago, a massive stone ceiling was lifted from the sands of Egypt and carried across the Mediterranean to Paris. Upon it were carved figures of strange animals, gods, and constellations. The zodiac of Dendera. Was it a relic of pharaonic astronomy? A map of the heavens before recorded history? Or simply an illusion born from the passion of European explorers for the ancient world? In the early 19th century, Napoleon's expedition to Egypt inspired a flood of fascination. Among those who followed was Dominique Vivant Denon, the artist and archaeologist whose voyage dans la Basse et la Haute Égypte captured Europe's imagination. At Dendera, the ancient city of Tintyris, Denon found what he called a celestial planisphere, carved into the ceiling of a dark chamber. He saw in it proof of the Egyptians' mastery of astronomy, and he sketched it feverishly, despite the heat, the dust, and the dim torchlight. Denon himself described the effort, the low ceiling, the suffocating air, the twisted neck he endured to copy every detail. He believed that bringing this image to Europe was not just an act of discovery, but a gift to science. Yet, as his drawings reached Paris, debate erupted. Scholars like Visconti and Laplace questioned its age. Was this zodiac truly thousands of years old, from the time of the pharaohs? Or was it a later creation, perhaps from the Greco-Roman period, when Egypt had already fallen under foreign rule? Visconti claimed the style resembled Greek sculpture, not ancient Egyptian art. He even cited an inscription bearing the name of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. But critics replied with wit. That would be like saying the Louvre was built under Napoleon simply because his initials appear on its walls. The great mathematician Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier, author of the monumental introduction to the Description de l'Egypte, defended the zodiac's antiquity. He saw in it a profound synthesis of art, religion, and science, evidence of a civilization that once mapped the heavens with divine precision. This single artifact, carved in stone and wrapped in mystery, became a symbol of two empires: ancient Egypt, the cradle of astronomy, and modern France, eager to claim the legacy of discovery and enlightenment. In 1821, the Great Circular Zodiac was detached from the temple and shipped to France, a feat of engineering as controversial as the act of taking it. When it arrived in Paris, it was installed first in the Bibliothèque Royale, then later in the Louvre, where it remains to this day. Through the years, scholars, from Saint-Martin to Dupuy, from Testa to Tardieu, published passionate dissertations. Each sought to decode its symbols: the lion, the bull, the scorpion, the balance, arranged not as decoration, but as a cosmic calendar. To some it represented the start of the world, to others the date of an ancient festival. But in truth, the Dendera Zodiac resists all certainty. It remains, as it was to Denon, a riddle carved in stone. Was this monument built under the shadow of Greek influence or in the dawn of Egyptian genius? Did it map the sky of pharaohs or the heavens of emperors? Perhaps its power lies not in the answer, but in the enduring dialogue it began between art, science, and the human need to understand the universe. This is, for Science, Salah Lotfy channel, where history meets science, and every discovery tells a story.